Good evening and welcome to the November 5th, 2025 meeting of ZIAB. First order of business today is welcome and approval of meeting minutes from September 17th, 2025 and October 8th, 2025. Does anyone have any comments or corrections for those draft meeting minutes?
I move we adopt it. Second.
All in favor, start with Patty.
Aye.
Aye. For the 10th, meeting on the 10th, I was absent for the previous
Aye.
one. Aye.
You got that?
Yeah, so do you just want to abstain from the entire
Abstain
vote?
from the, because I wasn't there.
Okay.
Okay. That was quick and easy. Opening up to public comments. Do we have anyone from the public on the Zoom? We don't, do we?
We do.
We do.
We were not on one of the meetings.
Do we have anyone from the public who wants to make a comment? If you saw the please raise your hand. Send them.
September.
Okay. Let us move on to the next item. Review and discuss draft goals, strategies and actions in the draft climate action and resiliency plan. I'm handing this off to you, Alexandra. Yes?
Yes, great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources. I want to use the time to go through the draft and get your comments, but I am just going to do a very quick overview. Okay, so our climate action and resiliency plan, this is the timeline that you've seen a few times. So we're in that action plan development right now. And we are currently at November 5th, which is the working session with ZIAB. And then I will be meeting with the Transportation Board and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee at their respective meetings in November and the 2nd of December, soliciting feedback from them on the specific goal strategies and actions that correlate with their mission as boards. Then we're taking all of that feedback and we will be modifying the goal strategies actions as needed, as appropriate, and then working on the prioritization of those. And then those prioritized goal strategies and actions will be available in January on the CART website and also shared with ZIAB as well. And then we will have a final review of those items as prioritized. And then we'll be moving towards a full draft of the plan and review and vote by ZIAB in March. And then following that, a vote by Select Board. Any questions on that? Great. So for this evening's discussion, I mentioned to you all, we shared all 5 sections and the associated goal strategies and actions. I'm happy to discuss all of them. But for today's purposes for this meeting, I would like to focus on section 1 and section 3, section 1 being buildings and energy, 3 being sustainable transportation and mobility. So if you have any copy edits or wordsmithing or kind of, vernacular changes that you would like to see, if you can send those to Rebecca and I via email, as soon as possible would be preferred, but certainly before November 26th. If you have marked up comments or notes, like if you've done track changes in a Word document and would like to talk through some of those tonight and then follow up with those, we would also accept those, of course, via email. And then if any of you want to meet to discuss any of your feedback in detail or talk through a specific item or items in more detail than we're going to get into here this evening, I'm happy to set up a meeting with you to do that. Just ask that you email me to set that up and that we schedule that before November 26th. At that point, we're taking all of the feedback from here and a host of other public meetings as well as staff, and turning things into the next iteration of the goals, strategies, and actions to prioritize. So with that, I will open it up, and Nick, you let me know I know you mentioned you wanted to hear from everybody, but if you want to go around the room or take hands as appropriate, but the questions that I thought we could focus on is what goals, strategies, or actions, which is what G/S/A stands for, are missing from sections 1 and 3. What do we feel like is in there that's not high impact enough to be included, either because of how it's structured or because of what it is? And then what doesn't belong in the plan that is currently in there? And if you have any other general comments or questions, also welcome those, but thought that those would help for discussion purposes. So Nick, I'll turn over to you and how you want to take the feedback from folks.
Well, I was thinking that it might be nice for everyone to have, we have an hour and a bit, 10 minutes, everyone to have a little soapbox if they want to kind of have a and give some general comments. And then we could move on. We could just go around the room and do that. And then everyone gets 5 minutes or something. And then we just get into a discussion. I think might be a good way of doing it if everyone thinks that's a good process.
So are we not responding to each comment made? So we each give our 3 minutes or whatever you designate, and then we talk after.
I think so, yes. I think that's better. And then if you have something, if you say something I want to respond to, we can have that as part of the general discussion. Does that sound like a good way of doing it?
Could I just ask a general question first,
Yes.
which is, just in terms of the overall plan, it seems to me there are kind of 3 different ways you could approach it. You could have a plan that basically had goals and objectives and all this stuff for just the most important things that you really think you're going to be working on in the next 10 years or something. Or you could go to the other extreme and have every single thing that anybody in town brought up, whether it makes any sense or not, and then have them all there, but with set priorities. Or you could be somewhere in the middle where you have, a bunch of things, but some of which are not very practical in the short term, but important. Somebody thinks important to have in there. Which of those 3 things approaches this overall plan going to take?
Yeah, I would say it's probably not quite the middle approach. I would say it leans more towards the a tighter plan with, here's the work and here's what we're trying to do, because I think in the past we have had a plan that went the other way with everything, and it was too much. So I think we for this plan are looking at things that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions and that are helping to build resilience in the community, and this is not a sustainability plan. This is a climate action and climate resiliency plan. So those are the 2 focus areas. And we kept coming back to those questions when we were revising this content of, is this reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Is this building climate resiliency? And those were the criteria that we were using for inclusion.
I want to ask a general question, and then we'll go to Patty for her 5 minutes soapbox. We'll start with you. That's okay. The order of the 11A, 11B, 11C. Is there any implied importance?
No.
Good. That's the only question I wanted to ask. All to you, Patty.
Thank you. Okay, I probably don't need 5 minutes. I'm gonna hit on sort of bigger picture things. I'm gonna send a markup to you guys in terms of wordsmithing, and also kind of bigger topic, maybe proposing a rework of the grid energy bucket. There's a bunch of NPA items. I've been kind of trying to get up to speed on the subject area and talking to people, have more people to talk to. And thinking from what I've learned in my travels, including talking to MAPC, that, there might be some reworking that could kind of help position us. So more on that. And I just emailed you asking for a meeting next week, so we can talk a little bit more about that. Missing, I would say, is consider it's touching somehow on embodied carbon, at least for municipal buildings, which are probably the lower hanging fruit. So I would think that could be a floor maybe for some language on that. Question about something that's in here and whether it's worth doing. I don't remember, I could look for the terminology, but it was the green labeling registry idea. I think that Somerville's been trying to do that for more than a year. And I don't think it's off the ground yet. From what I recall, I haven't looked at this in a while, but when I was in the spring, when I was looking at the first round of CARP ideas, I looked at that and I think it was labor intensive, staff intensive. And I have, I don't know that that's an effective use of resources where there are so many competing initiatives that are going to require staff time and budget and all that. So I have a question. I wonder if anyone spoke with Somerville to kind of get an update on how things are going there.
No, as part of this
Okay.
process, we didn't talk about
Okay,
it.
so that could be that could be informative. My impression is it may not be going super well. So I just want to say that.
That it?
Yeah.
Okay. My turn?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go through the list and then tell me if you have any questions. Okay. Overall, I think really central to this, the level of specificity is really good, I thought, because I could read through it quickly, pick out, where we were trying to get to with the actions. So I really liked the goals and actions that I was reading. They seemed like they had really delved into some of these topics without getting too jargony. But I think that really central to this, we need a communications plan. And I know that's not exactly what we're talking about, but I did see it mentioned in some of the action steps for some areas. And I think the whole thing needs a very robust communication of the community about the goals, strategies, and actions to keep top of mind for everybody in the way we're thinking about doing things now as a community. Like, this is a whole new world, right? That we can exert some control over, or whatever the messaging, but we need to kind of all be able to communicate that in an elevator pitch. So I hope there's a lot of work around that. And then going through the actual plan, I agree with Patty. The voluntary green labeling program, I think, is not a good use of resources. It's just going to be cherry picking by people who've done stuff, and who's going to spend the time doing that? It's just too confusing. I thought that when it came to BE 4.1B, leveraging a volunteer team to develop, plan for, and conduct targeted enrollment drives around BGE. We've kind of done that before. That is so labor intensive. That is one-to-one outreach at a table, and it involves someone focusing on big picture and specifics of an electrical bill. That is just mind-numbing. We didn't get any results with any of that and tried for years. I do like, though, about conducting educational outreach, which is BE 4.2B, about community solar subscriptions. Because just in speaking with Vikram about that, I learned about so much opportunities for people who think that they just can't do solar for whatever reason. And that brings everybody along to focus on renters and businesses and income eligible households. So I love that. Scrolling down. This is in section 4, but infill, plant, and replace dead or storm damaged trees townwide. I encourage you to possibly cross-check locations with National Grid lawsuit sites that we had done, I don't even remember when, 15, 20 years ago, about actual trees. And we won this lawsuit that were damaged by gas leaks. So we have the largest, tree budget in the Commonwealth probably, but then we're not fixing leaks and just replacing dead trees. So I would like to see some kind of pairing with that. And then I had some very minor suggestions that I can just send in an email. That okay?
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, I also have a version of this that has lots of comments and lots of detail, and I'll get that to you after tonight. Some summary things that I'd like to bring up now. First of all, I agree that the overall structure and level of detail seem appropriate, and I agree about the communication and education needing to weave their way in. what's missing, I think things I didn't find in the 5 categories, I'm not sure where they would fit. At least looking at how higher density residential development would fit in. And last time we met, I brought up the question about, like, for example, eliminating parking minimums and how that has a climate impact and where that might be part of our strategic planning for this CART. Second thing, my comment was around decommissioning gas lines, NPA, and in particular, the thing we learned in the last meeting, I think it was the last meeting, is that they're starting to be used for alternate purposes, like the power backup, the power generator, the natural gas powered backup generator. And that if we want to consider not allowing that use, because that'll just keep the pipelines going even longer. And then my favorite subject that I like to bring up every chance I get, leaf blowers and associated lawn and property maintenance equipment, portable generators. I don't see where in this format that would fit, but I think it's going to be an important climate goal for us to eliminate gas-powered lawn equipment, property equipment. Needs to fit in somewhere. General thoughts. I want to clarify and confirm that this includes, when we talk about municipal properties, we're talking about town, directly town-owned and schools, and all related properties, buildings, vehicles, everything is both town and schools. It might be worth highlighting that because I didn't see that in the plan. Made it sound more like this building, but not school buildings. Then a few items specific to transportation and mobility. When we talk about a municipal fleet, we're talking about fully electrifying the municipal fleet and increasingly relying on contracted services for things like trash, recycling, other transportation, maybe, I don't know. Are there carrots and sticks that can be brought into play to have our contracted partners also conform to our goals? We should continually monitor alternatives, particularly around mission critical and large vehicles. Not available now or soon, but they will be someday. There, I think, should be an item that says, let's keep an eye on that and incorporate it into the plan as they become available. I think we should take a look more strongly at not just overnight public charging, which I was pleased to see there, but looking at off-peak rates or demand pricing to manage grid demand. Editing references to bikes should expand to be more generally micro-mobility solutions. And if that's too many syllables throughout the whole document, somewhere at least it should say, when we say bikes, here's what we mean. Because it's bikes, scooters, other solutions. Final thing I want to mention is, I believe there is opportunity earlier in our planning, the word equity showed up a lot. And I'm not actually seeing that in here. And it seems to me that areas like BHA are opportunities for both Section 1 and Section 3. BHA and other partner kinds of housing and residential settings. And that we should look specifically at how to incorporate some of these goals into BHA properties. Many more details to follow later.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna pass. I didn't get a chance to review it in detail. Okay.
First of all, I agree with us. I said, I think the format works really well. It's easy to read through and focus on what you want to focus on and so on. So I really like that. And I'll start with also agreeing with Patty specifically on the embodied carbon issue, because it seems to me that's very, very important, just because that's where the future is going, right? I mean, that we're not all that far from well, there's still a ways, but we in terms of buildings and the building section, you know, that we're going to hit a wall at some point in terms of electrifying it, but when we get successful there, we still have the embodied carbon, so it's just really important. And I think at a minimum, there should be municipal policy. Again, I'm not saying this has to be done tomorrow, but somewhere in the plan, however we strategize it, I don't know where it falls, but somewhere in the plan, eventually there should be a municipal policy that says that town staff, when they build buildings or maybe even require other things, consider embodied carbon. And I would also, I think, feel just as strongly that again, for a long-term goal, I really don't see it as something that's doable quickly. For a long-term goal, we need to be talking about whole building the life cycle analysis. And that, if nothing else, if nothing else, I think we need to bear in mind that that sort of everything that we do, everything that's in the plan and everything that we do in conjunction with the plan really hasn't the component of educating the public to it. So that, for instance, even if the idea of talking about sometime 20 years from now having some kind of requirement that when somebody tears out a building, they have to do a life cycle analysis of embodied carbon. Even if that's 20 years off and something that's not at all politically palatable right now, which I think is the case, having in the plan starts to educate people, particularly from the point of the ZIAB. What you always say is that we need to be people not telling people what ultimately has to be done here, how people need to start. We need to start educating about embodied carbon. I'm curious as to whether you've talked with the planning department, because for several years, Maria Morelli talked, and the cultivation here talked about a proposal to incorporate green building guidelines into a new site plan review process. And it seemed like her opinion was that was something that was more doable in the sense that it's kind of, people are used to approaching zoning issues like that, and a lot of people would understand it and do it. I don't know, but if you've talked to her, great. If you haven't, maybe you should just see whether that is something that is still on the list somewhere. I also agree with Kathleen very much about the how difficult, how much we've tried, the number of people have tried to deal with the green electricity, and how difficult it is. And I can't find my note on it, but what occurred to me is that maybe we should be thinking about, again, it's maybe a heavy lift, but it feels to me like if you reach the point you have 95% of people signed up, or even just where we are right now, the people that won't sign up, strictly those laws, they need some kind of monetary incentive. And therefore, what we need to be thinking about is, if we want everybody on the program, is there a way of funding some kind of monetary incentive? Again, I don't see it happening quickly with current budget, which is not going to come out of the town budget right now. But maybe there's some way to do it. Maybe you do. Again, I haven't even begun to think about it, but maybe you create a program that people are in already, donate $1 to bring in new people. So I don't know, but thinking about a monetary incentive there, because I agree with Kathleen, just outreach and stuff is.
We need to focus on bigger scale solutions, not one by one, to greening.
Yeah, and just that people, you can talk to one by one, a lot of people go, oh, yeah, it's interesting, and then they don't do it.
Right, right.
I think that's all I have.
Just before we move on, just because I heard a couple of you mention it, I think maybe it might have been missed because it wasn't in section 1 or 3, but there is a goal around embodied carbon in section 2. So it's up here on the screen, RCM goal 2 and strategy 2.1 with various actions associated with it. So just wanted to.
Where is it again, and why is it in resource conservation?
Because the part of the definition for resource conservation was about waste minimization and minimization of carbon in any of our built environment. We actually maybe that one there's a few of them that we moved into. It could have fit in multiple sections, so we went back and forth on it a lot. I don't remember if this was one of them, but anyway, so it can be moved, and you can convince me to do that. That's just how it's defined right now.
So since you brought that up, I did read it in section 2 and noticed it. But instead of I think it's the first strategy, finding a municipal project that's historical. they should do Runkle. You know, they shouldn't, pick a project that's coming up and figure that out, so that argument isn't misconstrued in whether we demolish that building or not. But
Why Runkle?
There's talk about Runkle School, whether they're gonna demolish it in your decarbonization report.
Oh, okay.
So pick a building that's gonna be coming up and figure it out for that project, what is helpful, so we can actually like have it be really helpful for something we're pursuing.
Got it. I think part of the reason that it included historical property here was because that was one of the areas that the planning department gave us feedback was going to be the hardest to do this with. So to try to target that upfront, if we were looking to expand it beyond municipal properties because originally we had this written for everybody had to do this.
Right.
And the planning department was like, no.
If one of our biggest emitters is Runkle School, let's look at that.
Yeah.
And that's a great analysis to understand.
And I would still say that somehow we want to sneak in here something about the fact that the long-term goal is to be dealing with embodied carbon in private buildings as well. I mean, because again, as we always say, we're 2%, and we should lead by example. That's where we start. But be reminding people out there that it's all buildings should be considered.
I think that might be something that we fit into the narrative portion of the plan, just because I would like to make sure that if we have goals in the goal strategies and actions, that they have actions that are associated with them and that are really precise and measurable. So I think if this is a long-term thing we need to work towards, then that can go in the narrative of, embodied carbon goals are in here. The focus right now is on municipal projects, but with the intention that eventually when we revisit this plan in 5 years, or when we update the plan in 10 years, that, that we are establishing a goal around private buildings as well.
Can I respond to that more globally?
Yes, sorry. I also feel like I messed up the system. I was trying so hard not to speak. And now Alan didn't get to go yet.
So let's just have, I think Michael set his hand up for a second, longer than Patty. So we're gonna go with Michael first and then Patty, and then we'll get back to.
I sort of think I should take my cue from Alex and hold it.
Okay. Do you want to talk?
Well,
about it?
just on that very point, that this seems like something that we should think about including globally, because this is such a dynamic field. There's so much rulemaking and task force at the state level trying to figure out a lot of what we're talking about. So I mean, we should all be kind of, listening and going to conferences and just kind of keeping our ears out, about what's coming up. Just think about new steps, new strategies, as in real time. So there might be some language in the introduction more general than just embodied carbon.
Warner, are you wrapped up? Alan?
Yeah, couple of things. First of all, there are references here to things being monitored or checked in 2035, and others say 2036. And I couldn't figure out why they're not all the same year.
That's because it was 10 years and then 10 years depended on how you defined it as.
Yeah, well, yeah, I
Originally 2025.
suggest we use the same 10 years for the whole plan.
Sorry, I'm not gonna talk anymore. I broke my word.
The other thing I just want to mention, because Bill, you mentioned BHA and having something in there. Warner and I have been working and actually gotten input from Michael as well on the frequently asked questions. It turns out probably one of the only organizations in Brooklyn that's done deep energy retrofits of any significance is the BHA. And in fact, in the upcoming version of the frequently asked questions, I hope to have an accurate number on that, but from what they just did a deep energy retrofit on a building across from the Coolidge Corner Library, and on a $1 per unit basis appears to be at the low end of what's been done in Massachusetts. well, tear down versus retrofit, something you've been talking about, I guess that fits into the, embodied carbon, so I won't go on that. There was, let me scroll down here. Yeah, BE 3.2 talks about procurement. Now I inferred from that, maybe improperly, that you're talking about procurement as that's how people buy heat pumps. But if people are going to be doing retrofits, deep energy or just simple ones, you're going to need engineers, you're going to need A&E, you're going to need construction and so on. And I guess it's a question, what's procurement of what? If the procurement is simply equipment, a heat pump or whatever, then say that if the procurement is broader, it includes services, I would mention that. BE 3.3, you mentioned PACE loans, okay? Couple of things. First of all, as we've discussed already, most, not every project, but a lot of the projects are going to be very expensive and are not going to pay back. PACE requires payback within the lifetime of the equipment. So generally speaking, the equipment is going to include a heat pump, and maybe you can stretch that for technical purposes for 20 years or something, but 18 or 20 years. The whole project, including A&E, engineering, et cetera, has to pay back the loan in that time period. So I would suggest, and just a fun fact, I did contact the people from Mass, whatever, who do the PACE loans about 3 months ago. PACE loans, they have been around and available in Massachusetts since 2021. I might have the number wrong. Okay, I think there are 4 that have been done. Okay, it might be 6. All right, but I think that itself indicates that PACE loans have a limited application. So my takeaway on that is, if we're going to be talking about financing, we should have something in about financing support other than or in addition to PACE loans. Which brings me to another thing that I thought was really interesting. I guess it was a meeting I don't know. When we're talking, there were some people from Mothers Out Front, what's her name? I can't remember. Karen. And she talked about work that's going on to try to end the replacement of pipes. And I forget what the number was in her presentation, but it was what, $30 billion, or I mean, some enormous number. And it strikes me that if there's legislation to avoid spending that money, if you want to have a place where you can spend it, it could be to subsidize loans for decarbonization of buildings. Okay. Yeah, in the section 3, the sustainable transportation, and I don't know if this counts as nitpicking, but it says establish a baseline of how many registered EVs and ICE vehicles. I would say establish an annual update. And Bill already mentioned variable pricing based on peak load. I mean, my understanding is that like around 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the electricity is less expensive. I guess we do more solar, and some of the parking lots here would be, if you could reduce the cost, then might encourage people. I mean, I charge my car here sometimes because it's 5 cents a kilowatt hour less than I pay at home when I'm here. And I think that's, hold on. Yeah, the other thing I've mentioned, you've got an STM 3.1, gather baseline data on vehicle, pedestrian, and so on. I've mentioned this before, but I think we should include in that specifically gathering DMT data for Brookline. Well, cars that are garaged and registered in Brookline, which should be available for the RMV, the town clerk might have it. In that way, instead of using stuff, but the greenhouse gas inventory, I think we've talked about this before, is based on stuff that comes from Google, and it includes just somebody who's in Newton, going to a Red Sox game that's covered in that, or whatever they're doing. And if our objective, or one of our objectives, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are attributed to the town of Brookline, we ought to try to come up with a number for cars that are registered in Brookline, for driven by people from Brookline. And that is it.
Thank you, Alan. I have a couple of comments. First of all, I like the level at which it was pitched. I think it's I think a couple of other people said that before, so that was really good. I did focus on the buildings, and energy. I didn't look as much at transportation, which may have been a mistake. I really have two comments. The first is that BE 3.1, it feels, this whole section feels more like sticks than carrots. So, you know, the fossil fuel free pilot program is a requirement people have to fulfill, requiring construction. You know, I would have liked to see a little bit more in the, like, how do we incentivize, like, how do we remove barriers from new construction? And we haven't, we put some ideas together, but I think it's more like kind of a general thing, is like complying with fossil fuel free pilot program as a high level thing feels like it's too detailed. It should be more about how do we get more new buildings are more efficient, something that's kind of a higher level directional kind of thing there. So that's something that we can probably use a BE 3.1 D and E, and I can suggest some if you like, but that's just more directional. And then the second thing I thought was BE 4.1, increased community choice aggregation participation. I don't agree with the goal. I think that the goal should be something along the lines of make Brookline's electricity greener and cheaper. And whether that is through community aggregation participation or something else, I don't think it matters. I think we're looking at 10 years, keeping it focused on BGE is the wrong goal. So my two comments.
Can you come on that?
No.
Because I meant to say this, I mean, I think we've all, not all, some of us have expressed negative comments about the green electricity program for a variety of reasons, and spending time on that. Not the program, but just spending time and resources on it. And I had meant to say, I agree. And I had meant to say that. And I think we had talked in these meetings about how there are superior initiatives to push, community solar being one of them, that are much more effective. You know, maybe this green electricity is easier for some people, but they're more effective initiatives we could be spending time and resources on.
Community solar is in there somewhere.
Community solar is in here, and we have talked about that. And we also talked, we talked last year, actually before you joined, before you, Bill, and Alan joined, we talked about the fact that increasing participation in BGE wasn't a goal. The goal was greener, cheaper electricity, specifically, and maybe not even in that order. Maybe it's cheaper, greener, rather than greener, cheaper. But or there are parity or something like that. Because if we're asking people to spend all this money on electrification, it's very important that their electricity is cheap.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does feel like people who have opted out of the program have done so strictly on price, and they are less concerned with the renewable aspect of what's in the mix. They only, you know, there's just some people who just don't want to spend more money. And even though we give the stability of the contract, they just, you know, they don't care. They were opted out and they just want to stay with that thinking. So I think if the price were to be more appealing, they might come back in.
I think we also talked about the fact that the community aggregation has been a helpful tool. As the state increases its percentage of green electricity, it becomes less helpful year by year, effectively, right? It's moving the needle less as a consequence. So exploring other things is a good idea. Right? And you have some of that in here already, so I'm not going to go over that. So I think we're done with this thing. We can actually get to some discussion. And here, Alexander, I don't know how you want to do that. I took some notes. You took some notes. You want to do one each and pick a topic and just talk about it?
Sure, I had some follow-up questions that I would love to get kind of that one or two of you mentioned that I'd love to get some group feedback on. So I have probably 4 of those. So
Floor is yours.
okay. All right, so thank you all. Appreciate you reviewing and giving this feedback. I know it's a lot. So all really helpful stuff. For Kathleen and Bill, I believe both of you mentioned that this idea around a communications plan. So can you just tell me a little bit more if you're talking about each action item that involves outreach to a resident that we're asking them to take an action, that those need associated communication, outreach, education specifically for that? Or are you talking at like a meta level of we're going to develop this CART, publicize it, and we need to be able to communicate about the CART and the progress on the CART or something else?
The second for me.
The second for you.
Yeah, I mean, it should be like prominently, you know, where are we?
Mhm.
You know, I don't know where. I'm not a big fan of those dashboards. I don't mean that. It's just, what is our plan for the next year? Like,
Mhm.
what are we working on?
Mhm.
What have we accomplished? Like some, you know, metric that's, I don't know, you know, maybe it's something for the communications director to work with us on, but it does feel like something more prominently placed. Maybe it's some kind of digital sign on the town hall window. I don't know, but
Mhm.
something that communicates to people that we have a new plan. We're doing things different. And we have ambitious goals. So here's what we're working on for the next year.
Bill, was that your intention behind it as well? Anything you would add or modify to that?
Both. I mean, everything.
Both
everything you
sides.
said about, you know, the meta, larger picture, yes, absolutely. And then throughout the plan, there are more targeted items, and the one that jumped out to me was STM 2.3. Anytime you see the word promote, probably, and this is one of them, promoting low emission delivery and ride sharing practices. Well, any one of those is a target, you know, an opportunity for outreach around that particular need and promoting better alternatives. It would be in the context of the bigger picture. But I think it needs to be more targeted as well.
Can I cut to that? Cause I forgot to say that too.
Yeah, please. I was gonna say if anybody else
I
has a
wrote down,
comment or thought on that.
Marketing campaign, take advantage of town property in public ways, etc. I mean, you just need a lot of touches, you know, to people. I mean, and we have all this town property, we have all these parks. I mean, if this is a priority for the town and its residents, you know, they say so, it's hard. You know, and so how can we leverage that with different messages for different audiences, you know, whatever today, you know, I mean, just like kind of a just plain, simple, but reinforcing some kind of marketing campaign using the resources we have. And of course, a website that hopefully will be, you know, robust resource for people to turn to.
So are you calling hands?
I'm going to call hands.
Great.
And I'm going to call Vikram because he hasn't talked yet. So, Catherine.
Should keep my mouth shut right now. Yeah, I think you've heard from me around this topic. Like people are very like, if we are trying to change people's behavior, there needs to be a really good reason why they are gonna change behavior. Like, if it's a low emission transportation solution, all good, but is it cheaper for them? Is it more convenient? Is it door to door? Or it gives them better service, something that will, even if it wasn't low emission, they would be like, great, I want to sign.
Right.
So wherever we can find a program design that doesn't require people to change their behavior too much.
Catherine?
I think also that since we are, a citizen-led government, people will want to weigh in on some of these issues, to encourage funding for specific initiatives. And right now, there's no way for people really to find out what that is, unless they're coming to the meeting. And I think there were 2 people from the public. So there's no way for people to even follow what our group is doing unless they read a newsletter here or there, or, subscribe to some notification from the town, but it all feels very disparate. So how do we, encourage the culture to be more accepting of the things that we want to see progress?
Great.
I have a comment too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So on the question of the higher level communication plan versus the lower level. I mean, I don't think it can be one or the other. It has to be both. But I think that what we need, and I think maybe the town needs, but also maybe ZF needs as well, or whatever else, is a sense of like how things are meant to be done, like how we're going to proceed. And that's not just for us, but it's also so that we can have a way of communicating and engaging with the public that's familiar to them. So like everything isn't done a different way. So whenever we roll out our initiative, whenever we do something, it's like this kind of familiar process. It's familiar to town staff, it's familiar to ZF, it's familiar to the staff, to the select board or whoever else. I think that the kind of a communication plan is a template for how we communicate is probably what I would see as being important here. Because if you do that and you do it once, and then we have another initiative, you just take the previous plan and repeat it, right? And you have the same expectations, and we don't have to talk about it, we just do it. So I think that would be the flavor of the communication plan. Because if we have a lot of things that we're going to do, that would be helpful. Just like thought on that particular topic. Michael had some comments that he wanted to make. Did you want to make them before? Should we do them after Alexandra's?
No, I can make them.
Okay.
The first is like a very naive question. And I realize I'm in a room full of experts, which is great. There were a couple of conversations about embodied carbon, and from a naive perspective, it isn't clear to me whether you're talking about, figuring out how objects that are buildings that are being demolished better enter the waste stream so that the embodied carbon is not captured. Whether you were talking about incorporating the greenhouse gas emission cost of demolition into the consideration of how fossil fuel, what the greenhouse gas reduction impact is of renovation. So for example, if I'm replacing a building with another building that is, better insulated and uses is all electric and gets rid of fossil fuel systems, how do you incorporate embodied carbon or something else? And I guess in some ways it wasn't clear from the plan, and it also wasn't clear from the intentions, which of those aspects of embodied carbon you're considering.
Warner, do you want to start?
Well, I think that's a very useful comment in the sense that it ties into what my saying that there needs to be enough in this plan. And I think probably, I think I generally agree, Alexandra, that this will work fine in the narrative, although it may also need to be tucked away somewhere in one of the actual items, something about almost more like, begin the educational process with the community on embodied carbon. That the point being that embodied carbon is so complicated, it's all the things you just mentioned, right? I mean, the most basic thing you can do would be to have a town policy for, so whenever town builds a building, it should analyze the materials that it's using. I mean, we already have a bylaw that says we're experimenting with low carbon concrete. And that's the first little step, but then way down the line, way down the line, what I would like to see, and I've actually discussed with planning department a long time ago, is that even for private buildings, whenever somebody considers tearing down a building, it's easy. We don't have much open space. It's pretty easy if you have open space to say that you do body carbon analysis. Because that really just means building, it just means you're using good materials. But we have a situation of practically everything here is a tear down or a renovation. And then there's a new field among architects, people doing these whole life cycle analyses, where you consider everything. You consider what it costs in carbon to drive a diesel truck with the stuff to a dump. You calculate how much it costs to drive the truck to the site to bring in new steel, and then you have how much steel has in body carbon compared to laminated wood, and you even measure things about the ideal world about if you build a building with 3 doors, or people going to park farther away and they go with 2 doors, and people will take the trolley. I don't know, they're just, it's endless how much detail you already could get into this, and that's what makes it so hard to get started on it.
Well, I see what I meant.
It's helpful in understanding. I'm not sure if it's helpful in terms of action.
Can I say what I meant?
And then I'd like to speak.
I mean, you asked what we meant.
Yeah.
So let me just say what I meant. I really meant the life cycle analysis. Some communities, Cambridge, Boston, some others, I think, are doing this. They have ordinances that, for certain projects of a minimum floor size, whatever it is, they require developers to submit a life cycle analysis. And it's, as I understand it, becoming easier and cheaper, software enabled to do this. And so to illustrate an example in Brookline, over the Pierce School,
Right.
you heard some of the preservationist people say the carbon savings are more if we renovate Pierce instead of tear it down. So there is a mechanism now to do that analysis and address that question or concern with actual data. So that's kind of what I meant.
And I agree, you're saying exactly what I wanted to say about Pierce. Start there with the arguments, because a lot of that was kind of cherry picked to make arguments on both sides. So how do we get a real metric that is useful to understanding? I'm just using Runkle as an example. I had no idea that was even being evaluated for anything like this, but let's say that, they want to evaluate whether they're going to tear down Runkle or renovate it. Find a metric that we want to use, and it could just be stepping our toe in the water. It doesn't have to be whole life cycle analysis if the staff's not ready to do that, or hire a consultant, but we should at least understand so we can have a community conversation around it. Because right now, people are just throwing out numbers, from my understanding, about why we shouldn't develop anything. And I think that's not right. And I think that we should also be very conscious about taking each school project to a new level with our goals. And we're doing great, but we can do more. And I think that's a perfect opportunity to experiment there and find out how do we start this process.
Kathleen, you're saying Runkle. I think you might mean Baker.
No, it said Rumpel.
It said Rumpel.
It was Rumpel. One of the options this was on the,
It's on the decarbonization roadmap.
yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll that might be a mistake.
Okay. It did also mention Baker, but Runkle was mentioned several times with that, and I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, I was surprised. It's one of the things in there was that they don't have to replace what it was, some major component of the heating system until 2042, because they just put one in 2021 or something like that. And it was
right. And that reminds me, so then the other metric that could be really helpful, what's the operational savings and fossil fuel savings on new systems implemented? So, we don't have to keep revisiting geothermal every time later in the project. We just start there.
So just to add on the actionable part, because doing the life cycle analysis is great, but you're just checking a box. And when it comes to actionable stuff, what I would love to see is something that says, we're doing a renovation on a historic building, and that renovation pays back the carbon cost.
Exactly.
within a specific period of time, and 30 years is a good standard, then it's okay. So rather than having like a discussion every time about what is good, what is better, and what is worse, that we use some standard.
Yeah, that's what you had proposed.
Yeah,
a number
and
of months ago.
because doing the whole building life cycle analysis is not in itself of any use unless it's measured against a standard. And so you have to have that. I think we have to have some of those standards in place in order to make it easier for people to do the work.
You know, I think this is still on topic. Because we talk about renovating an old building. And an old building could be a historic house, an old building could be local school, which doesn't look old to me. This elementary school I went to was much older than that one. Okay. But you get into this thing about what is old, what has to be preserved. Again, I'll refer to the BHA thing, the building across from the library is a good example. They had to choose orange and blue and gray, but that used what are called prefabricated super insulated panels. Okay, they have enormous amounts of insulation. Okay? And I've read various things on them, but some of the things I've read say that it's cheaper to do that than it is to go in an old building and try to blow insulation in walls and do things like that. So from a carbon life cycle, that could be a good way to do it. I don't know the manufacturing process, but then people look at that and say, oh, I don't want to have, we had this old brick building and I wanted to continue to be a brick building. And somewhere in the life cycle analysis, you also have to say, do we have to choose, does Brookline have to have all brick buildings in, 2145? Or however long these buildings are going to last. So that to me, that's part of the life cycle analysis as well.
But that's a can of worms. So let's move on to the next question. I agree with you completely, but it's a can of worms. So let's just shut it aside. Yeah.
So, and the other comment that I had is I saw in the report a few references to density and residential density. But there's no place in the goal where in this document that I saw that actually says that one of our goals for reducing the carbon emissions is actually to promote residential density as a strategy.
And that was another one of your things.
So that's kind of what I meant by BE 3.1 being too focused on. I think B 3.1 should have that in it. So that this is like focused on fossil fuel. This is kind of the new building, new construction stuff. I think the new construction stuff should have some about higher density, and that should be an explicit goal in here.
Right. Yeah.
And that there should be carrots for higher density, not just sticks for fossil fuel free. Right.
And whether that's revisions to zoning or
Whatever it means.
whatever form it is.
And I don't think we want to put the details in here. I think we just want to have the sense of it, right? Because the details are.
What did you think of Newton's language?
Hmm?
I sent around Newton's language on this.
Great.
What did you think of that?
What's next?
That was
it. You have two more questions.
Well, actually, one of them was on the embodied carbon question, so you covered that a little bit. My other question was on Brookline green electricity. So I'm hearing feedback on that. I hear the feedback around it's very difficult with the strategy of trying to move people. Ultimately, that the cost savings need to matter. So I guess the question is, does the want to see something on BGE in community choice aggregation in this plan? Or is that something that we should not be focusing on? And instead, we should do more on community solar or some other program?
That is a very interesting question.
Isn't that answered partly by the stage where you have a matrix and you try to.
Well, before we try to answer the question, is the CARB just for changes to the status quo? Or is it also about continuing existing program? Because there's an element to this. We've got BGE.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be in the CARB because we already got it. So taking out the CARB doesn't mean we don't have BGE. It just means we're not working on it.
Correct. It means that we as staff aren't spending time trying to drive higher participation in it. If people are signing up for it, great. But if they're not, they're not. And that,
But it's a default program.
it's, ticking along.
So with that clarification in place,
So I think what PGE is, call it a tactic. The strategy, I think you said it already earlier in the meeting. Maybe the strategy is we are helping Brookline residents, or the target is to reduce Brookline residents' electricity costs by X%, call it 20%, while increasing the share of, call it, renewable energy by 30%. Something like that, right? So BGE becomes a tool or a tactic. If it can achieve that, great. If not,
we do something else.
we do something else.
I think I would say my answer to that very direct question is I would take out the BGE thing from the car. Personally, that would be my thought, because we're already doing it. And when I say we're already doing it, what I mean by that is that BGE is already the group who's managing it, what they call it.
Good energy.
Good Energy is already doing some work here.
But we did talk about direct procurement last time.
But direct procurement would be a separate strategy. It wouldn't be. Do you think this is part of BGE?
It is part of the reducing costs and unifying
Yes.
direct procurement.
But I think that's in here. I think the VPPAs are in here. Alternative pursue long-term virtual power purchase agreements, VPPAs through a CCA. So I think we already have that concept in here.
VPPA plus direct procurement.
Plus, well, then we should add that to 4.2.
Direct procurement.
So for example, you're buying power directly from, let's say, Cape Wind.
No, who is you, the town of
The
Brookline?
town.
So
Okay,
I think the specifics around BGE, I would suggest might not need to be in there, but some of the individual things you've got here, I think are important. So and before, if you want to take out BGE, and we should all talk about this more, because we should see if everyone agrees. So Patty, do you think that we should?
I do agree with you. I also think that we shouldn't, it's not maybe a good idea to put volunteer help into the CARP. I think it's particularly in this case, but just in general. I mean, I think there's going to be a lack of enthusiasm by the current volunteer body out there on this issue in particular, because so much time has been spent on the past, and it is kind of is where it is. So I don't know that people have a lot of interest in working on it.
Totally agree. It's kind of been done to as much as we can spend volunteer efforts. I mean, kind of speaking from others out front and have experience, maybe have more to share, but we've done the door knocking, we've done the tabling, all of that stuff, and it didn't move the needle much in the participation. And the utility will not release to us who is not on the program. So it's very hard to get that data. It's hard to target those people. You're literally offering kids, sugar to come sit at a table so you could talk to the parent, and they're trying to brush you off and go, figure out the rest of the event. So it's just hard to get people's attention on it in all of our outreach efforts. And like I said, it's just such a low response rate. It just seems that it would just require so much ramping up in a way that I think people are more interested on a larger scale project,
Newer things, community solar could generate.
Right,
Kind of
right.
There was also, and I'm going to get the name wrong, which is going to be really embarrassing. Cara Bruton. There we go. I got it right. Ooh, very rare for me. I think she said that, and you can check with her. Cambridge actually did like a paid outreach program to try and kind of like get more people onto their program. And what they found was that, and they did the research, the proper market research. They found that it was impossible. Their determination was that it was impossible for a town to compete with the other aggregators who are sending, stuff through the mail. And effectively, like, you can't actually compete, so you shouldn't try, was their conclusion. So aside from all of that stuff, there was actually a conclusion reached by someone who spent the money to determine whether or not that was a good thing to do, that in fact there is no good way of competing with these entities on this level. And there was also that movement at the state level to get to stop the sale.
Predatory.
predatory, the predatory stuff. And I think that if we were to spend time on something, I think that's an area where we should focus with the state rather than trying to do this ourselves.
So does that then eliminate trying to come up with like the direct procurement, things like that? In other words, it's just.
Well, because we keep BGE and then we try and find different ways of getting electrical supply into BGE.
Okay, but then you say reaching out doesn't work. I would imagine that if we came up with some way, first of all, my recollection, when we first did the Brookline Green Electricity, a bunch of us were involved in that. And it's still, you see it written in there sometimes, we don't guarantee the prices can be lower. It happens to have been lower, but we don't know that it's gonna be lower. But the fact that it's been lower, if people know that it's cheaper than going to Eversource, that's a reason they might want to get it. If you get direct procurement and it's cheaper, people might want to get it. I don't know how much outreach you need. I mean, you send something out to people and say our electricity is cheaper than this, and they'll buy it. And then the final thing, as far as people not being involved, I don't know. I know you can't get addresses. It might be interesting to see if you get something on commercial versus residential. I mean,
They're even more
could,
driven on price.
yeah, I know that because I've worked with, for our condo, we get contracts. I mean,
But they're not looking to get like the regular rate. They're looking to buy electricity from somewhere that has lots of land and wind or whatever,
right,
that can get it
Yeah.
really cheap.
exactly. And
So,
you get it
so
for
we can
4
never
cents a-
compete like next time.
Yeah.
We should probably table this, but just in response to that comment. If Vikram and Alexander went off and found the VPPA that got us electricity 5 cents per kilowatt hour for the town, we wouldn't need to advertise it.
Yeah, that's my point.
Right, so again, it wouldn't require an outreach program because no one would be able to compete with us, and it would be great. We would just do that. Like if we could do that, and I'm not saying we can, but if we could do that, it would be up and run. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Yes, that was all very helpful. And then, I'm gonna poke the bear a little bit on this one, lawn equipment. I know this came up before. I am intimately familiar with this topic, and it has been extreme. So I guess my question, Bill, is are you talking, I think you're talking about both residential, commercial contractors and town eliminating the use of gas powered lawn equipment entirely. Is that the goal, that all those different sectors are doing that?
Well, yes. I mean, if we have a goal of 0 emissions by 2050, the answer is yes.
So I think the challenge so there's the municipal side, and there's been a lot of electrification of the lawn equipment there. So I'll put a pin in that. But for the residential and contractor side, the enforcement on that has been absolutely horrific. It is, people call on their neighbor. They want us to come out and ticket their contractor or the resident. And we don't have like a rapid response team to do that. So sometimes we can get there, but sometimes we can't. And then they're gone. And then people are sending us photos to try to call the company. And, it becomes very difficult. So I guess what does that goal look like if we don't have the capacity to enforce something on the town side?
I don't have an answer to that question at the moment. I'm pointing it out is that if we have a goal of 0 emissions by 2050 and we're trying to put together a plan that gets us 10 years into that timeframe and that goal, we can't ignore the topic. And so I think it would be, and what comes to mind is a combination of information and education, right? Because that's a real piece of this. Monitoring alternatives as they evolve, which I think they will over the period of time we're talking about. I think any of these, most of the things in here have some enforcement implications. And I think you would be wrong to completely ignore the topic in regard. Address it somehow with all of its difficulties and all of its challenges and potentially opportunities.
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't think it's as important a priority as you do, but in terms of trying to be helpful. All your concerns already exist, and it seems to me this is the low hanging fruit approach to this would be just to say, we already have a leaf blower bylaw. Let's change it from decibels to, it has to be electric. And that's easy to do. It may not be easy to do politically. The point is, you already, the enforcement problems gonna be there no matter what. Because already got a bylaw that says you gotta do decibels. It's actually gonna be easier to enforce if it says it has to be electric.
Um,
But I'm not sure it's a great priority, and it's something that should be done, but I think the
advocate
market
for it as
will
a
take care of
priority.
itself eventually.
Thank you. So this is, I've gone to presentations about this at like Mass Energize conference and blah, blah, blah. It's a really sticky wicket and just for myriad reasons, not all of which might come to mind immediately. Lexington has been working on it for some time. It's very staff intensive. I don't know what portion of the emissions pie in the town this represents, and is there passion by someone here in working on it? Because maybe that, ups, maybe the my interest in having it in the car, but I don't know. I mean, there's limited staff time, there's a limited budget. I'm not sure the bang for the buck on that, given what I've heard about this topic.
But we already have agreed we're not prioritizing it. Yes.
But if it's in the curb, are we letting the community down if we don't work on it at all?
Well, we're not going to work on everything in the club all at once.
Mhm.
I think we had the meeting with is someone else have their hand up?
Yeah, but then we,
No, go.
I think town meeting is debated this endless times. They're so tired of it. It's very hard to find the right balance for Brookline and in any other community that Patty is saying. And as Alexandra alluded to, it's so hard to enforce. Even if we put it in there, it won't result in anything. But I don't mind it being in there if it had like a performance level, like maybe something like Warner suggested, or like all electric, I'm fine with that. I just think it's something that would be on the very lowest priority for me.
Fair enough. I think the priority discussion we've agreed is a different
Yep.
session, a different set of activities.
But we're requiring cars. I mean, it's just that that's such a bigger bang for the buck compared to leaf blowers, which is more of a quality of life issue. But then we also have commercial, we have a lot of interests to balance.
When we have the priority discussion, absolutely. But I'm saying to ignore it at this early stage.
And you could also argue that it's inevitable that somebody is going to come back to town meeting with something
Yeah.
that,
Oh.
rather than staff spending time proactively. When eventually some leaf blower here comes back to town meeting, then we just insert ourselves in the process and try to
Mhm.
make it as good as we
And we
can.
have a seasonal ban now, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're already partway there.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things meeting with Chaz, I don't want to call him Charlie, but Chaz, was he talked about unfunded mandates, like coming up with things that we can't actually at the town do. And so that I think is kind of part of the concern here is like, if we do something, can we actually force it? Can we actually follow through on that? And I definitely sympathize with that. I think that I also sympathize with Bill a little bit in the sense that maybe, going out and trying to find people individually is the wrong way to do it. Maybe we should say, if you want to be a contractor in town doing leaf blowing services, you have to register with the town.
That
Yeah,
is a
and-
requirement and they are supposed to do that and they're not doing it.
Right,
We can't
okay,
enforce that.
so, well, but that,
Not to be over negative, but.
right, but that seems like a more,
You can't enforce it because it's not legal to enforce it, or just the
people.
Capacity.
I can't go out and stalk everybody's lawn
That's
to
right,
see
yeah,
if
okay.
someone's there.
But
We tell them they're
again, the
supposed to,
sustainability division isn't responsible for leaf blowers, right?
DPW it.
Yeah, DPW, but, okay,
But it's a fundamentally more enforceable thing because you don't have to prove that the person is using the bad leaf blower You just have to prove that they're not allowed to be here at all, and that's a much easier thing to prove. And if they do it 10 times, then you've got a case. It's a more enforceable thing. So I do have a sympathy that maybe we could have something in there without specifying exactly how we're going to solve the problem, but recognizing that we can't have unfunded mandates in the car, but we should try and find innovative ways to address this problem.
What if it's just like supporting the transition to all electric leaf blowers, but we
Yeah.
leave it to other people who will inevitably bring it up in town meeting?
It's similar to EVs. We have EV goals. We're specifying those for every resident. And
So one solution in these kind of cases is, yeah, enforcement is difficult, but you make the stick very, very big. Right? You make the ticket so big that maybe you only catch one or two, but that sets the example of putting the scare. If we really wanted to stop it, you could.
Theoretically, that's
I had
politically tough, but theoretically, you're right.
I had someone put 20 bins with leaves outside my house. And I called the DPW. I didn't actually know what the DPW would do, but it was a contractor who did it. The DPW came along and put them all in a compactor and compacted the trash barrels and took them away, which I was kind of horrified with on the one hand. But that guy ain't doing that again, because that just cost him, what's a barrel cost? Like $50 times 20. It cost him $1,000 to put this stuff outside my house. He's not going to do that twice, right? So.
So we look at a different aspect. It's not the leaf blower per se, okay? But we've talked about metrics. And I can't quantify this, but I suspect that the greenhouse gas emissions from gas powered leaf blowers is pretty small on the list. And enforcement or coming up with someone to do this could be expensive. Does it really make a cut like that? And while I think it makes sense, eventually we want to transition to electric leaf blowers. Electric leaf blowers are allowed as well, so you'll still have people complaining about their neighbors. I would imagine most of the complaints are it's noisy rather than the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I would say most of them are probably noise driven, but some of it is people who I see something happening and I know it's not supposed to, and I want you to come out and deal with it.
Deal with it, yeah.
And probably the guy with the leaf blower also has his truck idling.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it.
Okay,
you've successfully poked the bait.
Yes, I would.
The topic of leaf blowers.
So in answer to your question on the lawn stuff, lawn equipment has a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases nationwide, but I doubt it uses as much in Brookline because we don't have as many lawns as other stuff. Yes.
I had a question, this is relevant to it. As I understood it from past meetings, we were gonna have, a format of near term, middle term. Yeah, so I mean, supporting leaf blowers could be there and longer, there are ways to tweak it.
Yes.
Perhaps. And then I just wanted to mention that in terms of penalties, we have because we are a town, and home rule amendment needs, we have a limit of 300 per violation. We can't go above that. So it's.
Okay, those were the big ones. I will just say, Kathleen, going back to the communications plan, I thought I was gonna have good news for you, but then you said, I don't really like those dashboards. So I don't have good news for you, but I will just remind folks that part of the RFP for the CARP was that the Blue Strike is helping us develop a dashboard that then we staff are responsible for updating for ongoing progress on the climate action goals. And we talked to them in particular about some easy infographics that we would like to be able to update pretty regularly, because some of these things, the progress, the movement will be slow and people will say nothing's happening. And so the ability to pull out some easy to understand, easy to visualize statistics for people to be able to comprehend that is something that we're working on. So
I'll retract my comment and say, I've seen a lot of bad ones. I don't think you're gonna do it.
I hope not.
So I think it could be really useful in communication.
My intention is good.
If it's the right balance.
but yes, heard on the need for communication. So,
Yeah.
thank you all for, the feedback. So Nick, I know you had questions. Oh, sorry, Mike.
I'm gonna let Mike.
I just have one other comment on the communication plan. So the first of the select board's fiscal year 27 goals, of which there are 18, is support and implement elements of of Brookline plans, including the comprehensive plan, the open space and recreation plan, the community health improvement plan, Vision Zero plan, and the climate action and resiliency plan. And the reason I'm mentioning that goal is because it's really the only place that I saw within the select board's goals that had anything that might lend itself to some broader communication effort. And so, one of the things that I think it's worth either me as a select board liaison or talking to other select board members or talking with Christina Metcalf, our communications director, and you may want to participate in that conversation as well, is to understand the town-wide communication strategies and how these plans might inflect that. And there might be a specific work stream, whether it's related to the CARP or it's related to all of those plans. Obviously, the open space and recreation plan is also within, so the available DPW. But there might be a tactic there or a strategy in terms of broader communication. Think so.
I think that's actually an excellent idea. I think if we had a townwide communication kind of strategy that flowed down, it'd be even better.
Yes, I brought this up in a few circumstances. And again, it's a capacity challenge, because if you have one person in the communication department and a lot of people saying, well, we want to communicate about our specific events that our committee is sponsoring, or we want to communicate about the plans that we're doing, which everybody should know about, then you have to have sort of an overarching strategy. So,
yeah,
I'm trying to put some thought into that. So if anybody has any ideas about sort of broad piece, I'm always.
I could get you a whole bunch of students from Bentley to help you develop a plan and do some work on it, but we could let that another time.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to say about the CARP generally, I really liked what you said, Alexandra, about if it's not actionable, I don't want to have it in here. So if there's a narrative point that someone has, like some idea, unless it's got something we can tie to an actionable outcome, not having it in the plan, I think it's both an excellent idea, but also I think it's a really good way of explaining sometimes why things aren't in there. And I think you should lean on that because I think it's really good. So just going through the stuff that everyone brought up that we haven't yet talked about. There's Bill, you brought up high density residential development and parking minimums. I think that sort of falls into this kind of more general idea that the kind of new construction or new building stuff might need to be beefed up a little bit. Contracted services, electrification of fleet, and procurement of goods. There's kind of, I feel like there's a kind of a general procurement aspect of here that might not be handled, which is, do we want to have standards around procurement? Like when the town's procuring stuff from, do we want to say, you have to meet these minimum requirements? Because that's quite a common.
There is an environmental purchasing policy that actually we're in the process of updating. So are you talking, sorry, I guess I should clarify. Are you talking about like office supply goods? Are you talking about furniture? Are you
I'm talking
talking about building?
The people who do our trash, if we're doing stuff, everything really.
You're talking about services, not supplies.
I think I'm coming back to Alan's question. Are we talking about goods or services? I think both.
Okay.
And services.
Okay, yeah, so the policy that I was talking about is not about services, that's about supplies, that we're updating. Right now for the services, it is challenging. I had this conversation, it's challenging because of how public bidding works. We go with low bid. We have to go with low bid. And so we can put in there that we are trying to encourage, that you electrify your fleet for your trash vehicles, or that we could encourage that we would like to, you to, perform using this X, Y, or Z standard. But ultimately, we are gonna go with. We have to go with the lowest bid. So it's, just a complication. I know that for our recent waste contract, they talked a little bit about this with Casella and, they couldn't require it as part of the contract that they electrified their fleet as part of that contract.
I'm very surprised
So couldn't,
at that.
couldn't there?
No, I'm not surprised a little bit. I'm surprised because I could go out to bed and say, I want to have double pane windows. And if someone came back and said, well, I'll give you single pane windows, but they're cheaper, I would not be required to buy single pane windows. That is.
Sorry,
that's-
Shelley did just correct me. It's lowest qualified, so whatever the standard is,
So we could just change the qualification to be, you must use electric vehicles, or you must have this.
yeah, I think the concern is, and the reality, is that is, we only get so many bidders, and so are we, are we outpricing ourselves for contracts
I
that
see.
we aren't able to afford?
We could have something in there about exploring it, because it's a 10-year window.
Mhm.
So rather than saying we're gonna do this and require it, like having something about exploring this, because it is a. If we do it and Cambridge does it and Brookline does, and then Newton does it and everyone does it, then
Yeah,
we're not, then it becomes the norm, right?
yeah, I think that some item in the plan that says develop a procurement set of service procurement standards to reflect our climate goals.
Yes,
Just develop the standards.
Well, actually, I'm the one who brought it up, and the specific thing was. Because you extended it beyond what was in here, what I was talking about. It's pilot a shared procurement platform or framework to support property owners interested in participating in joint procurement for large scale efficiency investments and power purchase agreements. So
Yeah,
the thing that was in here was, okay, there are people who want to decarbonize their buildings and can we get contracts so they can get a good price on heat pumps, et cetera. So I just want to make that clarification. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but my comment was specific.
I get that, and I wonder if the town is doing it, wouldn't it all go through the procurement? Like, how would we even procure stuff for residents if not through the town procurement department? Like, what would that even look like?
I don't think that would necessarily. I think it would depend. It would depend on what we were talking about, but I think in that situation, the action item that's in there right now is really focused more on a network platform for people to find one another on, and not necessarily that the town is playing a role in
I see.
in procuring those goods and those services for them.
Okay.
But Alan's comment, actually, what I wrote down, that action item needs to be clarified, because it's kind of confusing.
I don't have anything else, and it's 6:30, and if we end this right now, we'll have done something we've never done before. So. Are we done with this topic and we can move on? Excellent.
Thank you all. I appreciate the discussion.
Next up, 6:30, review and discuss draft municipal decarbonization roadmap for climate leaders application.
All right, so Rebecca's pulling up some slides here. I'm gonna hand things over to Shelley, who has been leading the effort on this, and now you all don't have to hear me talk for a bit. Shelley, off to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I think everyone has seen the draft climate leaders municipal decarbonization roadmap. And just sort of as a reminder, this is, and actually, do you mind, I didn't think to bring my computer down here. This is one of the requirements to become a climate leader community. We obviously have done many of the steps already. We have two outstanding pieces at this point, which is the approval of the municipal decarbonization roadmap. Today, we're really here to just review it and to see if we have comments on it. It's a draft plan. We're hoping that we can get to a point where we can approve it perhaps at the next meeting. And we're also simultaneously working on a zero emissions vehicle first policy. part of, just as a reminder, part of the reason why we want to become a climate leader is because it opens up a source of funding for us. The state, is making available up to $1 million in grant funding for decarbonization projects. And that's obviously something that's quite attractive to the town. So, there are, it's a bit, I'll admit, it's a little bit of a clunky plan. It focuses on eliminating the use of on-site fossil fuels. It focuses specifically on municipal assets. So it's really only looking at municipal and school buildings and our vehicles, and it takes a zero over time approach. So the idea is we're not going to do everything all at once. We're going to do things as there's a natural time for, when equipment starts failing, when we're going to replace a vehicle anyway, that's the time to look at decarbonizing it, not to accelerate that process. So the plan is based on specific triggering events. When a roof is being replaced, that's the time to start looking at solar, for example. And as I mentioned, when equipment starts failing, that's the time or when it's reaching the end of its natural life, that's the time to do it, to look at decarbonizing. There's the format of the plan is predetermined. So there's some clunkiness in the plan that, that's just the nature of the plan. We have the requirement, it is a state requirement that fiscal year 22 be used as our baseline. And we provided information to the vendor who produced the plan for our energy use for fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. So they were looking at multi-year, but 22 is in fact the baseline. The plan has to be updated every 3 years if we become a climate leader community. And obviously there's a lot in this plan that presumes that we're going to act on this plan, but for the plan to be actionable, this is a very, very high level plan, obviously. So we would need to do much more detailed studies and find funding to do many of the aspects of this plan. So, and maybe if you don't mind going to the next slide. What we did is we looked at, as a natural course of events, to be a green community, we need to track our energy use. And we track our energy use in a program called Mass Energy Insight that the state has rolled out. And based on that, we every year can look at how much energy we've used for all of our assets, all of our municipal assets, again, not community-wide, but municipal assets. And then we looked at who were the high emitters in terms of our buildings, and we identified 22 of our buildings as being the highest emitters, and those represent 90% of the town's emissions for the building sector. And we provided a lot of information. The Public Buildings Department was great in terms of assembling a lot of information about these 22 buildings, including, the age, the size, how many windows there are in the building. Are they double pane? Are they single pane? What's the age of the heating systems? What are the heating systems? What are the hot water systems? What's the building envelope like? Has there ever been an electrification study? And we provided all of that information on these 22 buildings to Power Options, who is the vendor who produced this report. We also obviously provided them, as I mentioned, that multi-year information about energy use, both by fuel type and by facility. And we provided them information about the 360 vehicles that the town owns as well. And then they looked at those 22 buildings and started ranking them. And I guess next page. So what the consultant delivered was really a very high level energy analysis of the potential savings, both in terms of emissions and, well, in terms of emissions, but both by facility as well as by vehicle class. And they looked not specifically at these 22 buildings. And in this report, there's a little bit more detail about 10 of the highest of those 22 buildings. And they also looked at our vehicles, and the ultimate determination was that we had the potential by 2025 to reduce emissions again from the baseline of fiscal year 22 by 97%. And again, this is mandated, but the consultant needed to look at various milestones. And when the first milestone is 2027, we didn't have any choice about that. The next milestone is 2030, and the last interim milestone would be 2040. So they projected that we could reduce our emissions by 13% within a few years. From now, again, it's a few years compared to FY22, so some of that time has already passed, and we've already reduced some of our emissions since fiscal year 22 by 30% by 2030, by 76% 10 years after by 2040, and then obviously 97% by 2050. And you can see that they broke it down based on buildings as well as vehicles. They have, for example, with light duty vehicles, you know, sort of a pretty steady reduction of emissions as we convert our light duty vehicles to electric vehicles. For example, the heavier duty vehicles, they really push out with the understanding that there aren't a lot of heavy duty vehicle electrified options available right now that are very practical for the town. So the idea is we'll be able to do that, but that will be pushed out for later years. You know, today is really to collect some comments and questions and feedback. And the report was just released last week to us, but we've done sort of a preliminary review of it. We've also had the Public Buildings Department do a preliminary review of it, but we want to incorporate everybody's comments and get back to the consultant and revise the report if necessary. We're hoping to return for a vote at the next meeting, but certainly no later than early December. And then we need to present this, you know, the report to both the school committee and the select board, and they would need to adopt it by the end of this calendar year for us to be eligible at the next cycle for climate leaders. So,
Great. So I think we have 10 minutes to discuss this. That's right. And I think a couple of people have to leave. So Alan, you're the first ZF member to leave. Do you have any comments that you would like to make?
Yeah, some of them I'm not going to bother to say. I sent you an email that sent it to Alexander with a couple of things about specifics of what was in the tables and just the clarity of the information. The zero over time approach, I understand. One thing that I thought about as I read that was, and we've talked about this in Bury, we want to consider possibly incorporating zero overtime as well. There was on page 6, there was the business as usual. There was emissions reduction over time. I think it would be useful. I'm assuming that's from the electrical grid, but
yeah,
yeah, I think it might be useful to explain, just have a sentence in there about that.
okay.
Okay, and then my main question was, is that there was conclusion that electrification be done without major service upgrades based on the heating and cooling loads of the existing buildings. And what I want to ask is, did that did that assume that there would be some improvements to building envelopes, or that's the envelopes as they exist today?
So the report that had previously been done, the electrification report for town hall, the health center and the senior center, did not assume any envelope improvements.
Okay,
It was a report done a couple of years ago by the engineering firm GGT.
mhm,
And they looked at the systems that are in those three buildings
okay,
and concluded that, you know, in their, again, very
Yeah.
sort of schematic
yeah, yeah,
analysis, what the recommended equipment changes would need to be made and whether that would also trigger an electrical upgrade.
so
And they
ba-
were saying that it.
so
did not
basically,
trigger
they can electrify the building with the current,
With the
electric-
current electrical service in all three cases.
yeah, and then the final question was, did they do or will in the future any studies be done to benchmark the building energy consumption versus stretch code versus the specialized code? In other words, how do these buildings perform against the current codes?
So I don't know how to answer that. I don't think that,
No is the
I,
short
I,
answer.
I think the answer is no, but I'm
Yeah,
not
that's,
sure.
yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Al. I have a couple of questions, but does anyone else have any questions? Well, comments, Bill.
Two fairly specific ones. Page 3,
Page 3.
we're looking at a list of 2022 emissions. Halfway down the vehicles list, it's kind of odd to see a bunch of vehicles and then charging stations. But I assume what you're saying is that there was 18 metric tons generated because of the charging stations, because we were using dirty electricity, or why are there charging stations? What was the 18 metric tons?
It's the electricity associated with the public charging stations. And, there is some emissions because they use electricity.
Because of the electricity that they use is not clean electricity?
Correct.
None of our electricity is completely.
None of what?
None of our electricity is completely. Yeah, but not 100%. Yeah.
So some calculation.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a lot.
And staff, I mean, one of the comments that I have is that I actually think that should have been excluded because it's not a municipal asset per se.
Yeah.
You know.
We're not
so,
charging there. You guys are.
You know, it.
But that's also.
Yeah, it was just a little-
You're neither producing the electricity nor are you consuming the electricity.
It was just a little odd to see it right there on the list, the way it was.
Yeah. No, I see it. But I'm not, you know, the other vehicles that are listed are all municipal vehicles.
Sure.
And what we did, because we track all of the town's energy use, we track how much electricity is also used at these public charging stations. But I would say, I'm not really sure, you know, it's not really a municipal asset per se. So,
And that's both the town-owned chargers and the privately owned chargers?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
It's
that.
both the town-owned chargers and the privately owned chargers?
No, these are all town owned.
So they do not include the green spot chargers?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
interesting. And then the second question is page 6. Can you just say a little more? Maybe you said this on this, but energy use intensity reduction. What is that?
So, every building has a certain square footage, and a certain energy use, you know, so it's the energy, the EUI is literally the, you know, a building that has, I can't do math, out loud, sorry. But, you know, you take the energy use and then you divide it by the square footage and you use that to compare buildings that are more energy efficient to buildings that are less energy efficient.
Regardless of energy source.
What it does is it normalizes the energy source, so all energy sources, kilowatt hours and therms all get converted to be MMBTUs. And then you use that as the standard.
Got it. Okay.
So the
Thank you.
lower numbers.
I hope a higher number is better because we're trying to get it higher over time. right?
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, she said a lower number is better, but I'm seeing the
Yeah.
numbers get higher over time. So I'm hoping a higher number is better.
I'm
Well,
not,
it's the
It's a
reduction,
reduction.
but you want a lower E
Oh, the goal is
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Got it.
Great. Kathleen, you had a question?
So, I'll just go through my list at random. The cover photo has a non-municipal building on the front of it. Found that odd.
the cover photo. Oh, yeah.
And then there's the Brookline High School. I assume the new building is included with the within the 4 buildings listed in there.
You're talking about,
So
Tappan
the
Street, Cypress
Photo
Street.
is the new 9th grade academy or whatever they're calling
Right,
that new
right,
building from 2021, I think. Is that lumped into Brookline High School, which includes the original building and the renovated science labs?
No, so we have an unusual situation where, there are 4 buildings, the high school, right?
Yeah.
The Unified Arts Building, the pool,
Yep.
the Kieran Pool and the gym.
Yep.
60 or 66, I forget which, Tappan Street. So those actually all share a heating plant. And the heating plant is at the Unified Arts Building. So as a result, those are all sort of lumped together, even though they're 4 distinct buildings, because we can't really figure out how much heat goes to each building.
Yeah, we looked at this when they renovated it because that was why they couldn't go fossil fuel free. And then I can't remember why the new building couldn't, but it was a huge miss because I think Cambridge built a fossil fuel free school the exact same year that opened and ours was not. So it's just kind of funny that we have a kind of relatively new building photoed, in the photo, and then we don't have a fossil fuel free system. And that was the primary slide we used to pass the fossil fuel free
Got it.
ban. But so if they didn't include it, why not? Because that's natural gas.
So it is included in the plan, but
Yeah.
it's not included in that campus because it's got its own separate
Right,
heating system.
okay. So
I
is it
did find
listed
the photo
out?
confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is it
you're
listed
right.
elsewhere in the plan, or is it?
Yeah, yes, it is elsewhere in the plan. So I'm looking at page 5. For example, when it lists the facility name, that chart.
Yeah.
And if you look, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down on the top section, it says 22 Tappan BHS campus.
Yeah,
So that's separately listed.
okay. And
And-
so,
And in fact, I mean, what the consultant did, which is based on what the Public Buildings Department does, is the Public Buildings Department takes an estimate of how much of the heat is going to go to each one of those 4 buildings, not 22
Right.
Tappan, because that's by
Yep.
itself.
right,
But it makes this estimate, and it's really just an estimate because we don't separately meter it because it's not 4 different plants, it's one plant that's just sending out heat. And based on that, they assigned a percentage of the gas that actually goes to the Unified Arts Building and says, but we're gonna give 75% of it to this building, and we're gonna give,
Yep.
10% to that building and 5%. And, it's an educated guess.
okay, so it's not called out with its separate page because it's not one of the highest greenhouse gas emission buildings in town.
Correct.
Okay,
But if you, again, this report is clunky.
yeah, no, I can see that as a
But if
confusing
you,
point.
if you go to page 25 of the report, which has, which is part of the list of individual buildings,
Mhm,
you'll see, again, 3/4 of the way down the page,
yeah,
it lists, 22 Tappan, and it says, sort of midway that, the heating system was installed in 2021. The expectation is in 2041, that there'll either be, you know, heat, ground source heat pumps or some other source of heat pumps. It also looks at the, and then that information gets rolled into, their predictions about how we can meet emissions reductions. So they sort of say, well, let's assume that in 2041, that building, heating system is electrified.
And they wouldn't do like a network geothermal for the
Well,
whole
they
campus?
wouldn't,
consider
right,
it?
they might, and in fact, they talk about, you know, a possibility of exploring that.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yeah,
I must have missed
I think that's, I mean, they didn't call it out specifically for that building, but I
Okay.
think there is some discussion
There is.
about,
Okay,
for
I
the
think I
four
just didn't know
buil-
what 22 Tappan was. I think I
yeah,
just
for
thought
the,
it was
for the
something
four
else.
buildings,
Yeah.
that are,
Okay.
you know, that literally share a campus or share a, a heating
Yeah.
plant, that those would be, as part of a campus.
And then the only other thing I would add or was kind of looking for is that in these breakout boxes for the higher emitting buildings, I think you have this in the appendix, but for some reason, I want to know the age of the building of Lawrence School. It just helps give me some context, like.
And those
how-
little blue call out boxes.
Yeah, right, because you've got all the building characteristics, and it says it in the narrative, but it doesn't say it in the same place for each building. So in my mind, I'm looking through all the buildings, wanting to know what's like our oldest one, what, you know, just for comparison, even if I know the buildings, I just want to know that metric, I guess.
Okay, good, that makes sense.
I had two things.
Sure.
So I really liked the end of this 24. It's not that I didn't like the rest. I really liked the end of it. The challenge I see in this is that all of these placement years fall quite closely together. So we've got a bunch of stuff in 2036, 2030, 2031, 2029. So there's just like this huge concentration of investment over a 5-year period, let's say. And I'm a little bit worried about the practicality of that investment and whether or not we've done any studies about the cost of this and how we are communicating the cost to the select board, because we just kind of devoted the 2040 kind of, you know, based upon the fact that like it wasn't practical and we're kind of like very aspirational. And I'm a little bit worried that absent some kind of costing in here, that we're presenting another aspirational plan, right? So that's the first thing. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to get costing in here.
There is not, that is not within their scope, but the part of the reason that this municipal decarbonization roadmap is required to become a climate leader is because the climate leader program is providing dollars to do this work. And so to apply for those dollars, then there's a cost estimate that's associated with it at that time.
And are any of these moving to the CIP? Like, are we even looking at that as a possibility, or is this just so preliminary? 'Cause I feel like we've been asking Charlie Simmons for this information for quite a while. This was very exciting to see it all assembled finally. But it doesn't sound like anything has been marched into getting in line, which I'm kind of surprised about, because that was when we talked about the high school renovation project, we had talked about getting a plan together for that. So it's been several years since we even talked about it.
Yeah, that's probably a larger conversation. I guess the quick answer is this document being taken into account in this year's CIP? No, because we're getting this document. The timing is not there for that.
Yep.
But I will say that kind of at large, I know that some of the intentionality of when we have to replace equipment, looking
Right.
at the cost comparison of a fully electrifying the building. So for example, where the HVAC system here in town hall is failing and we're going to need to replace that. And so the request was, all right, we would like to see what the price point is if we fully electrify this building versus some other option, less than that. Same for the senior center. So yes, there is some of that being done. And then obviously for the school projects, that's that's
Yeah.
considered there.
So it's kind of more case by case that's needed as the system's retired.
Exactly, but I think part of the question that I'm hearing from the sixth floor is, okay, I have Alexander, we're gonna give you, I'm making this up and no one's promised to give me this money, just to be clear. Alexander, we're giving you $10 million. Are you using $10 million on what? Because what you have here is more than $10 million.
Yeah.
So where are you putting it? Is it
Right.
going to building electrification? Is it going to solar? Is it going to EV fleet electrification? Is it going to something else? Like, where is it going? So I think part of that is also wanting to look at holistically all of the needs and then decide, okay, we're going to give you a bucket of money, again, in make-believe world, and how are we prioritizing it?
Yeah.
So I think the challenge I have is, if we were to vote on this next week, next time we meet, absent some kind of financial plan that supports the fact that this can be done, I don't know how, like, I don't know the point of voting on it. I mean, I understand the point, we need to have this document for the purposes of getting funding from the state, which might actually be a mechanism to fund some of these things. But if the dollar figure for this renovation is $1 billion, which is a number that has been floated around, this isn't happening, right? So I have that challenge, and I think that we need to think a little bit about what language we would put into this plan to express the fact that this is not a financial plan, right? That this is subject to financing or something else, and that because that's the reality, right? So. Otherwise, we kind of come off as amateurs that we haven't thought about that, and I don't want to do that. The second question I have is, there's an implication in this of increased electrical use. Do you have that, like, is it in here, like, just, I don't, just like, you know, like what our electrical use would look like in, say, 2040 and 2050?
I don't believe that's included in it. No,
I mean, I think I actually think it is, but it's.
We'd have to be calculated from the data.
But we don't see, I feel like we don't see the special sauce that they use, you know?
So it would be really good if we could get how our electrical supply usage changes in 2040 and 2050. That would be a super helpful thing to get quickly, because that's what you're looking at right now is electrical usage. And so if the electrical usage is going to change over time, it'd be useful to know what it is. And by the way, it can be like a finger in the air number. It does not need to be triple checked. That would be super helpful if we can get that shortly for this municipal solar question, right? That's all.
So similar for what I said for the CARP, it would be helpful if you have track changes or comments that are written out, if you could send those along to myself and Shelley by as soon as possible, but I would say no later than Monday, please.
I thought it was November 26th.
That's for CARP. I'm talking about for this document.
Great. Next item on the agenda, we're going to get out of here by 7. Promise.
Why don't we, can we talk about meeting dates and what we?
We still have another item
for
on
the
the agenda.
remainder of the year?
We can. The next item is update on further discussion with town staff. Does anyone have any questions about the email I sent out? Great, we can move on. Other business, time to the next end of the year. Alexander, we have another meeting?
Yep, so we talked about, our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, but starting it early because of town meeting. So it's scheduled for November 19th, but we're starting at 4 o'clock. And then we have currently a meeting scheduled for, our usual time of, December 3rd at 5 o'clock and December 17th at 5 o'clock.
Possible we'll have town meetings still on, or
Yeah,
I don't know. Neil said that it was gonna be 2 nights, but that's the 4th night.
Yeah, we'll be done by then.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be done.
I was told to be hopeful that you will be done by then.
and then the next date was the 17th?
Mhm.
Okay, that one, I'll be there for, so we have the dates. What are we hoping to accomplish?
The agendas?
For meetings.
I think we're gonna work that out. There's some stuff on the agenda, but I don't think we have the agenda sorted out yet, right?
Well, I mean, we do need a vote from ZIAB on the municipal decarbonization roadmap and the zero emission vehicle policy. So those are two outstanding items. And then I think that it is probably worth us having a conversation related to offsets. And one of our December meetings is that's gonna also feed into the climate action plan. So those are, I would say, the top three. And then I know that ZIAB is preparing their update for select board in January. So I don't know how participatory you all want to be in what that update includes, but you may want to take some meeting time in December to do just that.
We will.
How are you using the word offsets in this context?
That is a question back at all of you.
Well, because it could be, you know, bylaw and bird, I mean, it could be, like, they're different. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's right now the question is if we want to reach net zero, what role do we as ZIAB and the town, how are we defining offsets and what role do we want them to play in reaching that goal?
It's a huge question. So I think we can, it's 7:02 now. We're only 2 minutes late. I think that's pretty amazing.
You've done well.
Does someone want to move to adjourn? I can do that, can I? Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
The ayes have it.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.